This is my good friend and colleague, Paul Kirschbaum. I'm Leslie Wooten. It's 10:33. Let's get into it. Today's topic, back of house versus front of house, the internal disputes in the hospitality industry. So Paul, yes or no, back of house versus front of house is like cats and dogs. The BOH versus FOH is in the hospitality industry is a tradition that's passed down generation after generation. Would you agree with that?
Is it passed down from generation to generation, or is it cats and dogs? I think that's a two-part question you're asking me.
Okay, yeah.
Is it cats and dogs? Yes. Should it be? No. In most restaurants I've walked into, I said yes. Have I seen it? Not. Absolutely. Those are the good ones. Passed from generation down generation? No, it's not. I don't agree with that at all.
No.
I think no. I mean, if anything, it may be the last generation, but the way that a lot of these brigades, the old school kitchens, the bigger kitchens were run, that wasn't acceptable. It just wasn't. I think, especially in the finer dining, I think as things got a little more casual, and I think a lot of the professionalism in general, please don't kill me for this one, but in general, professionalism in the kitchen has rotted away pretty significantly over the last 2 decades, personally, that I have seen. And that's just not in one area. That's from every part of the country I've lived in. Can't speak for the West Coast though.
So I asked that question because in my experience, I see that a new chef or new line cook or a new front of house manager, they don't go in with that animosity, and I see it as some cultural back of house versus front of house headbutting that they're picking up from their peers and senior members, showing them that, oh, they think this and they think this, here's how you do this, or here's how you get this out of this side, or this department acts this way and this department acts this way. And I've seen that it just perpetuates generation after generation.
I don't think it's generation after generation. I don't think it's like a handed down trait. I definitely think it's a cultural trait, or social economics, or the really buzzword of the day of tribalism. I think that all kind of encompasses it. I don't think it was I don't know. I wasn't alive at the time, but I don't know if there was a battle between front and back of the house in the 60s or 70s, or I just don't know. So I can't, but I've seen it deteriorate over the time where we weren't trained that way. The way that we were trained at culinary school was not to be that way. Now, is there animosity? I think that the animosity really comes into the disparage of the pay and the hours. When you, as a kitchen guy or girl, you go in and you work all day, and you sometimes work 6 days a week. If you're on salary, you definitely work 6 days a week.
Yeah.
And per hour, you make significantly less than a server that walks in for a 4 or 5 hour shift and gets to go home and doesn't have to worry about a hot, greasy, cleaning the floors kitchen. They complain about side work.
Well, you could also say that the server could walk in and it's a slow shift, and during those 6-7 hours, they're going to walk home with $30-40 because they made nothing, where back of house made the exact same amount of money that they would have for the hours that they were there. They had less work to do, as if it were a busy shift. So,
but on the other side, they're less. You in the kitchen, it's a slow day. It's an easy, $100. But on a Friday, when you're getting smoked and you literally don't have any time to eat, you're getting paid the same. So it's kind of the same, just a different. Sure. I think that's where some of the friction comes, is when it's slow, the kitchen is probably a little happier, and the staff front of the house is not, and the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So that's where that makes perfect sense. That's the friction.
Yeah. Like, oh, we're getting slammed. Front of house loves it. Kitchen's getting buried. Oh, we're slow. Kitchen's able to breathe, and the front of house is losing their mind. So there's absolutely a disproportionate balance between happiness and satisfaction, job satisfaction, based on how busy you are, for sure. So let's ask this. During an average shift, what is the goal of the front of house staff?
personal goal?
As a collective goal, what are they aiming to do?
They're not make money, make tips
From
service from customers.
service.
They're the front lines of customer service in the restaurant. Their goal is to make the customer happy.
Okay.
And make money at the same time, obviously.
Sure.
But their job is to make the experience for the customer awesome.
Okay, cool. So customer, we know everybody's working for the money side of it. So that's absolutely a factor. But for the most part, as a whole, they are working for the satisfaction of the guest walking in the front door. Cool.
Yes.
So similar question, during an average normal shift, what is the goal of the back of house staff?
To make sure every plate is beautiful and get out in a timely manner.
Okay. So consistency, we might say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's flip that. On one of those average shifts, what does the front of house think the back of house is doing?
Nothing. They think they're just twiddling their thumbs and throwing food in the fryer. It just depends on the establishment. I've worked in places that the front of house definitely knew how hard those guys work back there, and girls. I think that they're in the bigger establishments. They don't really understand what goes into it and how the timing it takes to do things, to get things out at the exact same time. If you have multiple stations, a fry, a flat top, a grill, a salad, a garmager, a soup, a dessert, whatever it is, all that it's a dance, needs to come out at the exact same time. So and I know we're going to get into this, but if a server puts something in wrong, their expectation at times to get that should be an easy fix literally derails that whole dance.
Fantastic. Yeah. So the front of house might think, well, the back house just has a simple job to do. All you're doing is making enchiladas or putting stuff on plates, where the back of house has this big, like you said, dance of getting everything timed right so that we can send the fries, the burger, the salad, everything out hot, fresh, the way that it's supposed to be at the right time. Sure. So let's flip that. During an average shift, what does the back of house think that the front of house is doing?
Making mistakes on a daily, every minute.
They think they just only make mistakes.
The mistakes are just so magnified in the back. And their small mistakes make big mistakes in the back. And I think that the staff in the front just thinks that they run food. They just really think they just run food, and how hard could it be? Though the ones that have worked the front of the house really know, but because it's not an easy job. Neither job is easy.
Neither is easy, yeah.
But I think the back of the house just thinks that they're just glorified runners.
So yeah, so each of them, I think we'd both argue, thinks that the other's job is super simple.
Yes.
Yeah, so the back of house thinks, oh, you're just out there talking to people. That's all you're doing. Talking to people's easy. You're just taking an order and you can't even get that right. Where the front of house is thinking, all you have to do is put stuff on a plate. How hard can that be? Like it takes 2 minutes to make this one meal, and we know that it takes a lot longer than that. So could we say that the controversy between back of house and front of house is really a balance between the back of house is committed to fixed standards that help them time things out and get everything executed in the right amount of time, the right way, and versus the front of house who's trying to be flexible with guest requests? Would you say that that might be a fair evaluation of what the true controversy is?
It's a little, that's just a fair example. I mean, it's so complicated.
Sure.
I mean, in a bigger picture, it's like the separation of soft skills and hard skills. Kitchen is more of the hard skill kind of, though you need hard skills in service. We're not,
sure.
not saying that.
Totally, both need it, but I love that. Yeah. Like, absolutely. The back of house is brought up mostly of hard skills. This is the recipe. This is how you do this.
Yes.
Versus the front of house, like you're saying, is the soft skills. And that's, here's how you treat people. Here's what you're supposed to say to people. Here's how to be nice to people. Here's how to handle difficult customers. Like, that's phenomenal. I like that. Hard skills versus soft skills. Cool.
Yeah. Or even if you're doing the culinary world, is baking versus cooking. Baking is very science oriented. This is how much goes in, and you put a little too much of this. That's the back of the house. And then the cooking is more, hey, we can adjust on the fly. Let's make things, we can change it on the fly. And that's more what happens in the front of the house. They have to be more flexible. You know, it's a fixed versus flexible kind of world, and sometimes that clashes, and it's the most minute things. That's the crazy part. It's not the big picture. For some reason, nobody cares, but the small things. It's the small things that drive the friction. I mean, it's like, I told you not to put salt on the fries, okay?
Sure.
Or on that plate, I didn't want mashed potatoes. I wanted hash browns. Well, you know, that if you're making everything a la minute, that's a problem. You know, that pushes. And if there's 8 people at the table, that is going to hold back 8 other entrees. Right. And I think what people lose, you know, if you worked in the front of the house, never worked in the back, and if you work in the back of the house, never worked in the front. I explain it this way: when your life was front of the house, and you go home and you cook for 1 or 2 people, is way different than cooking 100 covers in one night and being consistent at it. And vice versa, when you're a chef and you're cooking for a few people, 2 or 3, 4 people, that's not a big deal. But when you're cooking for 100 people or serving 100 people, it's a bigger deal. So I think that it's the scale of everything that makes it harder. And if you've never done it for a living, you don't understand the scale of it.
Expectations are high. From the guest, from the front of house, from the back of house, we've got this list of tasks that we need to do, and any little thing could tweak the whole thing, and it'll just domino effect into making it a big deal. And for some of those that are more experienced, you know, when those fries come out wrong, or the order going to the back of house is not modified correctly, that's going to snowball into everything else, and that's a huge deal. And some of the staff might see that coming, and so they snap to way too quickly about, this is wrong, and I know that it's going to ruin this. I'm like, let's just move forward and figure this out. So have you ever worked in or worked with an establishment that was able to connect back of house and front of house?
Yeah, I have. I've definitely worked in an establishment that can connect both.
What's the glue? What's the connection?
It's culture, communication, understanding. The culture of the restaurant, and that comes from high up. And it's usually when you have leadership that kind of breathe the same air kind of thing. They're on the same page. It trickles down. So usually when I walk to a place that has a great chemistry, it comes from up top. It's the communication from up top. It's the culture from up top. And it's the way they present it. I mean, it's just the tone. You know, we talk about all the time the tone in text or tone in writing. You can't read it, but you can't feel it, and you can when it comes from somebody's mouth, and then you can see their body language. And I think it's a hard skill to learn. It's not easy, but it usually comes from leadership, and that's where it is. They drive that. That's their expectation. There's no tolerance for that kind of stuff, and there's actually a pipeline to where we can fix those problems that there are. So what we talked about, mistakes come back to the kitchen. You know, usually the biggest issue, it's the way the POS system's set up.
Sure.
Somebody set the POS system wrong. There wasn't a modifier for that, so they handwrite it. Well, they handwrite it wrong, or they forgot to add it, or that button's not there to add. So they had to go back and tell the kitchen. They told one guy, but the other guy's cooking it. And that's the communication part. But usually we can trace it back and fix it somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, maybe the chef didn't know about it.
That's frustrating on both sides. That's front of house frustrating and back of house frustrating. So they're each mad at each other when it's neither one of their faults. Absolutely.
And you know what? And I mean, I'm guilty of this. So if anybody's watching this that worked with me in the past knows I didn't, when I first beginning my career, I didn't deal well with a customer telling me how they wanted something done. You know, my mentality was, I went to culinary school. I've been doing this for, years, and you think, a little arrogant. Over the years that fell off, but a little bit, just a touch. I think that, people just, it's easy to point figures, blame the back of the house, blame the front of the house, blame the server, blame the cook, when, you know what, it might be a bigger thing, and I think those where the communication and the leadership come in. And when they're all on the same page and they have the same culture, it's a beautiful sight.
And from the learning and development world, I've worked with companies, big companies, whose entire management team would go through 3-4 weeks of training and have maybe half a day in the kitchen, and all they did was prep or learn to expo. They did not get in there. They did not see what was going on. They did not see the time and the effort that the culinary team put into it. And then they just moved them straight to the front of house so that they could deal with the sheer number of staff that they had, or the sheer number of guests walking in, so that they could put these fires out as fast as possible. Instead, I would argue that we've got to find a way to connect these managers with these managers, and not just in a meeting once a week or once a month, however they wanted to do it, but in their training and in their daily interaction, so that you've got a manager who can fluidly go from the front of house to the back of house and can manage either side. And most importantly, they're seen as a manager from both sides. Because if culinary sees that, oh, only my executive chef is my manager, or front of house sees that, oh, only my AGM is my manager, versus that chef walks out to the front of house and says, hey, let's do this, or let's do this, that front of house staff should respect the chef the same way that they respect their AGM or whoever your floor manager is, and vice versa, that back of house should see that when a manager or just another coworker walks back there, that they're not out to get you. And I think a lot of that just falls right on the management training, and how a company can set it up for success, or they can go, no, let's divide this right from the start. And I just have seen that so many times turn into a pure divide, where they're creating the cats and dogs. They're creating the divide by the way that they're training their management team to go into it.
I've trained under a few corporate as a manager, a few corporations. Some I had a kitchen background. So I'm one of the few that started in the kitchen and migrated to the front.
Right.
I've done both sides throughout my career, but I've trained in corporate settings where, one corporation, I spent, like you said, 2 or 3 days in the back of the house prepping, 2 hours on the fry station, 2 hours on flat top, and I did another one where you did a whole day from a whole shift on each station, twice. We did back to back, so you can so you wouldn't forget. And you had to run your kitchen manager shift once a week. We had a KM, but you still had to run a shift once on your week schedule. So they did take it, and it was a better run machine. Because you need to. How many times do a manager need to hop on the line? And there's ones that can do it, and there's ones that can't.
Absolutely. My first management job is the one that I thought, show me the numbers, show me the numbers, show me the numbers, which I thought that's all management was. And I think you remember me telling you that my first few floor shifts, my general manager said, nope, go adjust the blinds, go adjust the music levels, go adjust this, like had me doing all of these things in the front of house that I thought were not important as the numbers at the end of the day. That same company, my management training was 2 weeks in the back of house. I spent 2 weeks prepping, working the line, doing line checks, running expo, just what I felt like was stuck in the kitchen. And I didn't have training on the numbers or all these things that I've seen so many companies spend so much time on. I spent all this time in the back of house. And then when I was out of training, I was back on the floor, and lo and behold, it was exactly right. Because when anything happened in the front of house or back of house, I could jump on the line, I could jump on expo, I could go to where I needed, and I was good at it. So there was a respect quality there of, oh, Leslie's coming back here, I know that he can do this, versus what's this manager here doing that they have no idea what they're doing, they're going to ruin everything. And so you know both sides, you're able to work both sides. And I don't see why a lot of companies aren't making sure that that's the way that their management team is working.
It is funny, we go out on Sunday nights, industry night, when I was doing this every day, when I was working in the restaurants every day, and front of the house, back of the house got along great. We give them a couple beers, but inside the battle, they just, it was, I'm guilty of it. When I was younger, I was guilty of it too. So I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. And even if you do have a bad day, it's still just, you had a bad day, and it's okay, and just get over it and move on. And don't hold the animosity in. But I think it just builds up, and I think that's where the communication and management's job is, to kind of like release that pressure. because it's going to build up. I'm telling you, no matter what, it's a stressful job on both sides, and different kinds of stress, but on both sides. And sometimes that blows up, and you're working so close next to people, and you come from two different sides of the world, or two different areas.
So we've seen managers go from the front of house into the back of house, and vice versa. Like you said, that you're a chef first and have learned to work the front of house. Based on that, or not having one or the other, should management take sides? Should they leave it alone, or should they intervene to fix the issue during or after? What should management do about it?
Definitely don't take sides. We definitely want to take sides, and ever. It doesn't win. There's no win on that. It's a lose-lose. Intervene, fix it. Let's get through the shift, and then because usually you usually don't have the time to fix it on the spot. Just defuse, and then we got to revisit it, because if you don't revisit it, then it's going to run into a bigger issue in the long run. The burying your head in the sand, hope it goes away, does not work in the restaurant business.
So you said diffuse, and that's something that I'd really like to talk about, making sure that when managers saying, oh, I need to diffuse the issue, because sometimes you go in and you don't recognize what the true issue is. Because if I go into the back of house, I'm going to say, what's the problem? And they're going to say, well, this was wrong, or this was wrong, or this is wrong. Or if I go to the front of house and I say, what's the problem? They're going to go, well, this is taking too long, or this is taking too long. And that's not actually what the problem is. And I think a good manager is going to recognize the problem is a lack of communication, not the typo that was sent in from the modifier, and not the fries that are waiting too long. The problem is that the front of house and the back of house isn't working together. So I think a good tip for managers going into this is, when you go to approach the chef, or you go to approach your server or bartender, start talking about the solution rather than asking them, what did the back of house do? Or what's wrong? Because something's wrong. And when you start talking about what the solution is and how we can get to that solution together, and I really think, especially in the moment, that's going to help both sides move forward rather than build up the frustration.
Yeah, let's fix it. How do we fix it now? We don't have time. Let's just let's fix it and move on. We'll talk about this after the shift if we want to go to deeper dive. But to make this simple, the battle between front and back of the house can be easily, a good manager can handle it. You can make it smooth. I think leadership, it's just the culture. Even if you walk into a situation where there's a battle, a good manager can fix it.
I totally agree. Yeah. And like I said, don't try to ask them what they think is wrong. You tell them what's wrong and ask them to help you solve that situation. So is there a winner when there's a divide between any two departments within a company?
No, there's no winner. I don't understand. It's just it's back to that whole tribalism. Everybody just they know what they know, and they're around the people that know and think the same thing. If you want to call it politics, think of politics. Hey, I'm with the people that think like I think. I don't want to talk to those people because these people think like me. And I think that is just not good. It's just not good for, when you have cross-trained, when you have servers that can do kitchen shifts, when you have kitchen shifts that can do front of the house, and they're cross-trained and people work together, it's a team atmosphere. And same thing if you have marketing and sales and maybe HR, if they all, you don't separate them, you keep them all together, and share ideas, because some of the best ideas I have gotten for items on the menu have come from the front of the house people.
Sure.
They're not chefs, they're not cooks. They're like, it'd be really good if you did that. And you're like, wait, that's actually really, really smart. Actually, a couple of my recipes have come from servers and bartenders. You know why? Because they're talking to the guests every single day. And a lot of these guests are highly food educated. They know the industry, they know they're foodies, they know this stuff, and they just make off comments. The servers pick it up, and even if they sell them as their own, who cares? They're telling, they're bringing that feedback of, hey, these are some good ideas. Because any chef that thinks he knows it all scares me. Because as I've been in this industry, every single year I realize I don't know crap. You learn so much more as you go. You're like, there's so much more to learn. I don't know jack, because I want to learn so much more. Um, I learn every day, and that's why we do this show. You
Yeah.
know, I want to learn from you. You want to learn from me. That's why we do this. And I think that any chef that won't take, or any kitchen won't take that, feedback or that opportunity to be better, that's on them. That just tells me all I need to know about them. I want to learn. I want to get stronger. I want to get better. I'm telling you, some of the best ideas have come from people that don't cook.
Yep. I think the responsibility of resolving the back of house versus front of house, or let's just be even more general, any department within your company versus another department, the sole responsibility falls on leadership over those two departments, not of the department. It's not the executive chef's sole responsibility to solve that back of house versus front of house. It's not your director of marketing's responsibility to solve their issue with accounting. It's leadership's responsibility to determine what the issues are, what it's bubbling up to be, and resolving that. And I think a lot of it goes right down into the leadership, the development, the training of your leaders when they move into the roles and the positions, that they need to learn to see the bigger picture. And like you said, it's not this side versus this side, like-minded versus like-minded. It's like, no, we've got to show them how we're all similar-minded, because we're here for the good of the business, for the good of the guest, for the good of adherence to the recipe, to the standards, to accounting, whatever it might be, that it takes all of us to work towards that. And I really think it's going to take a good, smart leader within the company to build those bridges and get everybody functioning together.
I'll ask you a question. Where do most managers come from?
Most front of house managers, I'm gonna say that they're probably generally following the usual career pathing within a restaurant. They're going to start off as a host or a server or a bar back, move into a bartender position, and then immediately go into the floor from there. And so they're going to have limited experience in the back of house for a front of house manager, and they're going to pick up on what I started this conversation with, a lot of the industry traditions handed down to them, probably based on frustration of thinking, oh, that's just the way that it is, when in fact it's not. And I think they're coming from your bartenders, your front of house staff, who doesn't know anything about the back of house.
Exactly. And they always lean, or they always side, like you said earlier,
Yeah.
with the front of the house. And a good manager, well, he or she will draw their own conclusions and find like you said, find a solution for it. Get some insight, get what's going on, and then find a solution. And that's just the way, and that's the communication aspect of it. And I'm telling you, in the kitchen, they respect that very quickly. And it's not side taking. It's just, hey, okay, fine. This is the problem. How do we fix it? Is it a button?
Yeah.
A lot of times it's a button. You know how long it takes to put a button in a POS system?
Not
Unless
long.
it's micros? Not long.
Fantastic talking points. I think it really helps illustrate the difference between not just back of house and front of house, which is the biggest one that I know of, but any departmental clash or any individual clash. And it's really going to take good leadership to understand what's going on and help both sides move forward. I think these points could help anybody listening or watching bring that into their business plan and help to improve your restaurant, your business, your dynamic, your culture, and ultimately your bottom line by getting everybody on the same page. Any last points you want to make before we head out?
Nope. I think we covered a lot. I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes.
Yeah, there's a lot on this one. So be sure to leave us some comments. Tell us about your experience, whether it's back of house or front of house or neither, that they should be united, and here's how. Tell us some fun stories that you've had of misunderstandings. Like we like those as well, trying to figure out what are the causes of these problems as well. So from either side, we're happy to hear it. And we're also happy to talk about how you as a manager or leader in your business can work to resolve those issues. So be sure to like and subscribe. And thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.